We are live. So hello everyone and welcome to the next session of 24 Hours of UX. As you may know by now, because you may have participated in some of the earlier 13 or even more sessions, we are a global online conference which puts emphasis on local speakers and organizers. So instead of having a global collection of people who pick out speakers, we partner, and we are actually a collection of local UX communities who bring speakers from the local communities and bring them to the global stage. And we also have, of course, keynote speakers and some high impact people, and this session will be similar to that as well. And we will be talking this time around about Scaled Agile Framework and its connection with user experience design. Before we get into that, a few practical things. So on the right-hand side, you are able to write things into the chat. We'll be seeing that. There's also a Q&A tab where you can add questions, which we will be addressing later on. And in the bottom, which I see some of you have already found, there are some reactions, some emojis that you can send.
Luke, I think.
I was guessing that might be something going on. Don't people from the audience, don't hold back with your inputs either. If you have trouble understanding people who talk way too fast, like myself, there's a closed caption option with a little CC icon at the bottom. If you turn that on, depending on your browser, you might get some problems, but hopefully it should give you subtitles in a pretty good manner. And I think that's about it for the intro around the entire event that I wanted to give. We are at hour 14. There are 2 tracks, so there's plenty of talks happened before and that will be happening after this. We have 2 tracks, one on practicing UX and one on elevating UX. And this is about elevating UX because we want to, scale UX along with the development efforts of an organization, and that's where Scaled Agile comes in. And most of the talks are brought to you by local groups, as mentioned, or almost all of them. This one is an exception. And the reason for that is because we at 24 Hours of UX thought that this topic of a Scaled Agile Framework and user experience design and their integration needs to be addressed. And we want to start a conversation, a dialogue, a discussion around it. And this talk is sort of a starting point for this. And if you're wondering, okay, what is this whole Scaled Agile Framework that Peter is talking about, then Danibos will explain that to you in a second. But before that, I wanted to introduce our 2 guest speakers, Jeff Gothelf and Luke Hohmann. So you may recognize their names from the covers of some books. Jeff is mostly known for Lean UX, but he's done a ton of other stuff as well. And we had him last year in 24 Hours of UX as well as one of the keynote speakers. And we are super happy to have him back again, especially instead of him being able to define the topic, us being able to approach him, because this is something that he's been writing about in the past, in the recent past. And our other speaker, Luke Hohmann, is founder and CEO of First Root. And before that, he's been founder and CEO of some other companies as well. And he also has his name on the cover of some books. And Luke worked for Scaled Agile for a while, consulted with them, and was working heavily on the user centricity piece of it. And we'll be telling more about that. And Jeff's approach on Lean UX is actually integrated into SAFe, or tries to be integrated. We'll hear more about that. And that's a quick one from me. So Dani, do you want to do a quick intro into what is Scaled Agile, and then we can hand over to Jeff and Luke.
Yes, thank you. As we told already, we want to do a quick, brief introduction into Scaled Agile, into SAFe, so you have a quick idea about some elements. But I think also during the discussion, you will learn a lot of elements about this whole approach and elements in it. So SAFe, as Peter already mentioned, stands for Scaled Agile Framework. And as far as I know, it was initiated 2011 by Dean Leffingwell and some colleagues starting to try to put stuff together. What I think is interesting, SAFe is an approach to coordinate dozens or even hundreds of people to work for a common goal in some kind of agile way. So it promises that large enterprises can also work in a manner as innovative, as agile, as dual track, or as smaller companies or startups. SAFe draws on many elements like lean, agile, as I told already, DevOps, system thinking, and sometimes I think almost all frameworks or approaches I ever heard about. So it's a huge combination of different elements. I personally first encountered SAFe some years ago when in our company we started an agile transformation, and then the question was how to scale up. And I think somebody figured out about this SAFe approach, so it started and we went on. So what I see, it's quite popular among large firms. Actually, if I talk to many colleagues around here in Switzerland or somewhere else, some of them really work already in a SAFe environment. So it's a topic we can debate. Some of them like it, others hate it, and others say always it depends. So that's also why we really can discuss about it, and I really find it also interesting to discuss a bit about it. So what I showed you here is the big picture of SAFe. Usually you will encounter, if somebody shows you SAFe, something like this, in different configuration, something like this, or even something bigger like this. So what I first encounter, many people think like, oops, that's a lot of symbols and elements in it. So just to give you a brief glimpse in it, SAFe is organized around layers. Luke, you can correct me if I use the wrong wording in it. And has some different elements in it. It also has, and that's why we also have Jeff here, it has something I figured out, it's written here, lean UX. It was actually something I was surprised and also happy to see here, because I was like struggling with the whole picture, and then I said, oh, this one I at least know. But we will listen and hear more about Jeff, about how he came to become here its place. Also, there are different stories of SAFe. This started maybe with 4.5. Now we're at the later iteration, 5.0. So we also have something like customer centricity, design thinking in the framework. What we also see, while those are the elements we really see in the beginning and think, oh, it could have to do something with user centricity, user-centered design, it's also a little bit more hidden, for example, in the element of continuous exploration. Or I recently made the certification in it, so I saw that it's actually also part of built-in quality, or maybe once here in an architectural runway. So it's distributed among certain elements, but still, when I encounter it, I often have questions, and we have often debates how to set it up and how to do it. So here, you can imagine within my great team at the Swiss Federal Railways, or also with my colleagues around, we're always discussing how could we actually contribute as UX people as effectful and meaningful as possible in this overall framework. And now, I not only discussed with my colleagues or others, I also once discussed with Peter. And Peter and I were also like telling, so what should we do? But then we saw actually an article from Jeff, which was criticizing agile approaches. And we thought, let's do a workshop on it. Let's start with 24 hours and really let's dig into deeper in it. Let's learn from each other, because actually it has a potential, but what can we do in this story and how can we move it forward? So if you want to learn about Scaled Agile, you can look at the framework. And of course, now I'd like to hand over to Peter, who will introduce Jeff or Luke. And I really look forward to a debate now about all those topics. And I'm really curious, how can we best integrate all the UX power we have in the whole group into bringing SAFe forward and also bringing UX forward. Thank you.
Exactly, because what we wanted to do, and thank you for that summary, Danny, that we wanted to bring the UX community together to, instead of struggling with SAFe, how about we actually, work on it a bit, and let's see how we can improve, or we can make some changes, or if not, then at least find out how others are succeeding with it. So we wanted to start on the positive note, and we will get started with Luke Hohmann. And as mentioned, Luke has been instrumental in the human-centered approach of SAFe. And if you look up some other pictures that explain SAFe, you may actually see Luke's photo on it featured as well. So what we'll do is we'll have 15 minutes for each contestant, and then hopefully we'll have a fight. I guess not, but a discussion around it. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to Luke. And Luke, if I left out anything in your introduction, then that you feel is relevant, please do add.
Thank you. No, I think that's fine. And I appreciate the introduction, the opportunity to talk here. I appreciate Daniel's overview. And I also am very happy to be here with Jeff. I actually, for all the attendees, one of my projects and one of my inventions was featured in Jeff's book through a mutual friend. I'm actually in a photo in Jeff's book, which I'm very proud of. It is a book that I enjoy and I love. And I think it's got a lot of deep insights and deep wisdom. And I think when we start talking about practices, we should take a step back and talk about espoused theory and actual practice. There's our aspirations of how we want to behave and how we want to do things. And then there's the actual practices that we put into place. And any method or methodologist is working in the realm of espoused theory. And any practitioner is working in the domain and the field of actual practice. I have, when I joined the Scaled Agile team, the story there is in 2018 and early on, I reached out to Dean and I said, look, I want to meet with you because, SAFe is moving into portfolio management and is moving into product management. And I think I have some techniques and some practices that could help advance SAFe. And one of the qualities about SAFe that I enjoy is that it's easy to criticize, but it's also important to realize that out of all of the methods, SAFe evolves the most and is invested in the most, right? Most of the other agile methods are relatively static. Whereas if you look at SAFe version 2 versus SAFe version 5.1, which is where it's at now, it's evolved quite a bit. Now in that realm of joining the company and being acquired and joining the framework team, I was an advocate for customer centricity and design thinking. I was very happy that one of the main contributions I was able to create was the new overview picture, which puts the customer in the center of SAFe, which is, of course, for every customer-centric approach, the customer and their needs and the full stakeholder analysis and the full environment analysis, that's our primary objective. I would be the first to agree with any criticisms of SAFe that prior or a few years ago, there were many very common practices in SAFe, very common techniques, very common frameworks that were not there, not just not discussed and not referenced or not integrated. We've tried over the last year to integrate more of those in, right, over the last 2 years. So, a couple of years ago, SAFe didn't have a concept of story maps or journey mapping. I needed to create the relationship between the operational value stream and the journey map. And as a methodologist, when I put that hat on, I'm humble. A lot of you would say something like, and one of my friends is Goiko Adju, who's the impact mapping person. And impact mapping is a great technique and well-known in Europe. And so then the question becomes, well, Luke, you were in charge of that part of the framework. Why didn't you put impact mapping in? Don't you think it's good? And first, of course, I think impact mapping is good. It's a great technique. But I think that the question becomes, if you think of a method as a recommended set of practices, the goal of the methodologist is to try in their own experience to recommend a set of practices that kind of they feel work the best but are in fact not limiting to other good practices. So for anyone on this call who's familiar with impact mapping and you think it's got value, the way to look at SAFE is to say, gee, I'm using SAFE. Should I adjust a certain practice based on my own experience to create a better result? Yes or no? And I'll give you another concrete example. If you go to firstroot.co, we have open sourced all of our UX artifacts. And you can see our personas, you can see our journey maps. But one of the things that I like to say is before there's a story map and before there's a journey map, there's an actual story of the persona. I'm a huge fan of comic books. And so we write comics, graphic novels, for those of you who need to explain what a comic is. We write graphic novels that explain what our users are experiencing. So I'm not going to go any further because I think having me talk for 15 minutes and then having Jeff talk for 15 minutes is kind of boring. I've done enough, and I'm happy to kind of have a discussion with my friend, and I want to hear him because I think he's brilliant. So
thank you.
I think that's more than enough for me, and then we can get going into it because we got Q&A and raised hands and stuff. So Jeff, boom, tag buddy. You're
all
in.
right. Excellent. So look, my assumption here is that we're all trying to achieve the same thing, right? We're all trying to build great products. We're all trying to build successful teams. We all want to make sure that the work that we are doing has impact, has relevance, is meaningful, and ultimately makes our users successful, makes our companies successful, and is rewarding for us as individuals, right? So I think in that sense, we're all on the same side. I think that like Luke, I've worked and continue to work as a practitioner as well as a methodologist. Never thought of myself as a methodologist. And I'll add that to my many job titles. I like that. But I do that, and so it's interesting, you know. And so my point of view here comes from the experience that I have had working with the teams who are attempting to integrate the practices of user-centered design, design thinking, lean UX, product discovery, and frankly, agility as part of implementing SAFE, and are struggling. And they're coming to me often and they're saying, hey, you're the guy who knows a lot about these things. How does it work in this environment? And I've worked with them, we've tried, and we've struggled. And we've struggled primarily, we've struggled to be successful. And again, it's not to say that it's impossible, right? I think the reason why we struggle, frankly, is because there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I think the majority of organizations that implement SAFE see it as the destination, right? They see it not as the beginning of a kind of an ever evolving, continuously improving process journey, but they see it as a destination, right? Once we get everybody certified, once we get all these, the team structures in place and we get everybody kind of rolling, then we're done, right? And I think that organizations that see that, and I think about, and in my experience, and to be fair, my experience is anecdotal, right? I don't have statistical significance for this. I haven't done extensive research into it, but the organizations that I've worked with or have heard from that use this process, generally speaking, use this as the destination. Let's get here. Let's get to the point where this is implemented, and then we are done. And then rather than assessing, right, is it working for us? How well is it working for us? What's the measure of success? And how might we evolve it further? Because the idea of evolving it further means starting to stray from the program. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of folks, right? Given the level of investments, right? The level of investment that organizations put into safe implementations it's high. It's really, really big, right? And so when they sort of arrive at this destination, they're like, okay, that's it, we're done. And if people are like, hey, you know what, we implemented that thing, it's not really working for us, or you know what, we're missing this component where we actually, you know, do this very powerful technique. And they're like, yeah, that's great, but like we've implemented safe, so we're doing safe, and we don't want to move this forward, because again, moving forward means deviating, generally speaking, away from the recipe. I think that's part of the challenge that I've seen in the teams that I've worked with. The other challenge that I've seen is around agility, right? To me, the definition of agility is adjusting course based on evidence, right? And the benefits of agility is the ability to react to ever-changing market conditions, geopolitical instability, competitive threats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the techniques that we practice in UX, lean UX, part of discovery, design thinking, user-centered design, are the techniques often that generate the evidence that inevitably contradicts the plan. And when the plan is threatened, people get upset and people get defensive. And what they tend to do is they tend to say, well, look, we've got this six-week release train. We're just going to see it through. You're like, but we learned 2 weeks into it that this thing isn't actually going to deliver the value that we'd hoped for, right? Like, but we got to ship in 4 weeks or the whole thing breaks. And so there's this, as a framework, right? What I see in safe implementations, again, my anecdotal experience, is a bias towards delivery and a bias towards predictability rather than a bias towards agility, continuous learning, continuous improvement in real time, sort of market time. That's what I've seen. And I think that's where the challenge is. And I think that the folks who reach out to me, they're like, well, how do we do this lean UX stuff or this design thinking stuff in a way that actually has impact in a timely manner? And I think that's part of the reason why they struggle. So I think there's kind of, if that's my opening statement as to where I see a lot of the challenges with this.
All right.
Very good. I don't know, Danny, if you want to, because this is a great intro and great sort of expression of the views on what Scale sort of is good in, how it tries to deliver, or how it potentially fails to deliver. And what we want to also do is look at, its UX specifics. So I don't know, Danny, if you want to mention some points around that.
I actually want to build on the final statement of Jeff Gothelf on UX and how to do the design thinking or whatever user-centered approaches rightly within, and what kind of struggles we are at the moment have. Like, people feel a little bit disempowered sometimes they're just running behind deliverables. And so I would like to ask you, Luke, how do we cope with that one? That's what people perceive, feel, this drive towards delivery, and less towards research or less in design thinking, in opening, figuring out new solutions and delivering outcomes, not just outputs.
Yeah. Before I deal with that, let me find points of agreement with Jeff. And one of the challenges of anything as sophisticated as safe is that there's a lot there, and it took me my own time to get up to speed on safe, because I'm a framework author, right? So I can tell you which articles I wrote in the framework, but you wouldn't see my name on them because the framework team is continually working on the framework, and it's a team of 5 people who try to write with one voice. And so there's a couple of things that I think are really important. Some are personal and some are framework. So for me personally, Jeff, I have more than one known Twitter rant with the Agile community that would agree with you that I think the word transformation itself is a bad mental model right off the bat. So when an organization comes to me and when I was consulting and they'd say, I want to do a digital transformation or an agile transformation, I would say, then don't hire me. Because if you hire me, you're going to have the mental model going in with the word transformation is that you're going to be done. And there's a new way to work in Agile, but it doesn't mean you're done. It means you're working a new way. Agile's like sleep, but you're not going to store it. It's like food. You're not going to eat once and be done eating. Well, hey, I had dinner tonight. I'm done. Really? You're not done, right? And in fact, that's why in innovation games, one of the few references I write about is the notion of finite versus infinite games, right? If you're playing the product game well, all you get to do is play it again tomorrow because it's an infinite game. It's not a finite game. A release is finite. A sprint is finite. An iteration is finite, but the relationship is infinite. So Jeff, I am on board that this notion of any notion of a destination is suspect for sure. And I agree with you. Now, the other thing is that a lot of people, and this is just human nature. If you read the safe Scaled Agile Framework at version 3 or 3.5 or 4.0, you have a mental model that was formed and it was valid at the time that it was written. But as safe evolves, as other methods evolve, we often have an outdated, antiquated model. So the UX community says, hey, look, you got to stay current with your customers. You got to do continuous research because as your environment changes, Daniel, I'm sure you're in the Swiss railways, right? I'm sure 15 years ago, you didn't buy tickets frequently on your flip phone and your Nokia. And I'm pretty sure now one of the dominant mechanisms of buying tickets is through your phone. So as the world evolves, we have to allow ourselves and give ourselves the permission that we can evolve, but so can these tools that we're using. And so, for example, this notion of agility, the deviation from the plan, and I love what you said, right? Techniques that generate evidence that threaten the plan are dangerous, and people reject those in SAFe implementations. And Jeff, SAFe actually has something called the program predictability measure. And the program predictability measure is designed to give leadership an idea of how well are they operating in steady state conditions. Because if you're in a steady state environment, and I want people in this phone call or this session to think about the vast majority of things that are being built in the world. Like right now on my desk, I have a Yeti microphone, and in my home, I have a Sonos sound equipment, right? So if I'm the manufacturer of speakers, then I've done some design work, I've built my product, and now I've got to run a business. So I need some notion of some predictability to manage my business. Danny, I'm sure the Swiss Railways is actually doing, macroeconomic planning of population growth to know where the urban densities are going to be needed so that you can kind of start to plan to have the right transportation infrastructure in the right places at the right time. So human life requires some notion of predictability. So to say that we have a plan is what we need to be successful. And in fact, Agile says we value responding to change over following a plan. We never said we don't have a plan. So now, Jeff, in terms of the notion of SAFe, when COVID hit last year, I started to look at the program predictability measures to see how agile a SAFe company was. And what you would expect in the time of COVID is your program predictability measure would be completely blown, meaning you would have some reasonable predictability. COVID hits and you'd see a massive dip. When we didn't see that data in certain SAFe implementations, we knew that that company was not using SAFe as intended, because the program predictability measure isn't how well you're going to hit your plan. It is, in fact, in a steady state environment, how reasonably are you predicting your work and your behavior based on this? And when things change, as COVID caused a change, or when data comes in from your continuous exploration research that what you're building isn't wrong, if you don't see a dip in your program predictability, it's evidence to the leadership team that you're not responding to the conditions. So I would argue the other way around, that a reading of a proper reading of what we intend in SAFe is we're creating the necessary data so that you can prove that you're responding to this new information by showing that you've had a dip in your program predictability.
My experience has been that in that dip in predictability is often accompanied with reprimand as well, right? Well, you said you were going to do this, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean,
yeah.
You know, I don't disagree with it. And there's a lot of crap environments, but to associate that with SAFe is not necessarily, I think that those environments would have had the same attribution of retribution or retribution, whether it was SAFe or otherwise. I think what's more interesting, and if people on the call are familiar with my work, you know, when I published the road mapping pattern language in Beyond Software Architecture in 2002, as near as I can tell, I was the first person to say, I don't give a crap about how fast you can produce stuff, because it's the market structure that you're serving that matters. What are the market events? What are the market rhythms? What is the nature of the market you're serving that's going to determine when you need to get product in the market? If you're building toys, yeah, there is a hard deadline. Sorry, kids, that's how life works. If you don't have the toy in the production line, and if you're not in the market by probably, in most countries, by October, you're not going to hit your holiday shopping season. And for those agilists who are not date driven, I tell them, you know, great, go be rich or do whatever. I don't care, because there are dates in the outside world that matter to your customers, and you need to understand those. And so a date driven, agile or otherwise product development process, to me, is one of the more fundamental requirements of success in the outside world.
Jeff, do you want to quickly reply on that? But then I want to go back a little bit more to UX topics that people are occupied with here in the group. So
really quick. I mean, look, seasonal businesses obviously have deadlines, right? So fixed dates, right? There's fixed dates, and then, like, are we fixing scope with that date, right? What is
actually it? Every business. So I'm going to counter that, Jeff.
Really?
Every customer I have done market rhythms with have generated market rhythms. I'll give you one of my favorite examples. I had a customer that I thought for sure would not have market rhythms. United Technologies Aerospace Systems. Now, for those of you who are listening in, I'm sure you don't know what UTAS is or does. I sure didn't until I started working with them. What they do is really cool. They're a $13 billion company with about 8 customers. They make the landing gear subassemblies for planes. So when you're flying on the plane, the entire landing gear is one subassembly that they bolt into the plane, and they away they go, right? So their customers are Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, McDonnell Douglas, right? And as you can imagine, that's a pretty big piece of gear, and it's pretty expensive. So I'm teaching a product management class to their senior product leaders. And I said, okay, this is part of my product management class, and we do market rhythms. And I said, draw out your market rhythms. And they're like, oh, that's easy. Boom, boom, boom. And they draw them out. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I thought you didn't have a seasonal business. And we don't have a seasonal business. but there's a seasonal buying cycle, and the seasonal buying cycle is associated with these conferences, and these conferences are known years in advance, along with the product lines and the product projections and the plane projections. So I used to think that notion of a market rhythm was, quote, seasonal. And every time I go to a customer and I say, draw out your market rhythms, they do.
Fascinating. No, I was just thinking about airplanes. Look, inevitably there are seasonal businesses. I don't know that every business is seasonal. Or let me put it this way: I don't know that every business has to be seasonal. Right? I think that some businesses obviously do, like the ones that you've described. I think some businesses do it simply so they can have a deadline to force some kind of just to artificially motivate people. But I don't think any of this has to do with SAFe. I think ultimately what this has to, where I try to get my clients to is agility. And I agree with you 100%. Every single initiative has a plan. Right? Doesn't matter. Like we responding to change or following a plan is great, but we start with a plan. Waterfall, Agile, SAFe, Scrum, whatever it is. We've got point A, and then we've got a desired destination. The question is, how do you frame that destination? Right? What is the measure of success? What's the definition of done? In the last couple of years, Josh Seiden and I worked closely with Scrum.org to put together a course. It's a course called Professional Scrum with UX. Now, Scrum is a significantly simpler agile methodology than SAFe, but nevertheless, it's been around a long time. It was the thing that hung us up the longest in trying to figure out how to build a class that fundamentally respects the agile principles, the manifesto, the Scrum guide, and the work in lean UX. The thing that held us up was the definition of done, right? How we define success, how we defined this was something that we actually are no longer going to work on, and we're going to move on to something else. And that took a really long time. Obviously, when you're assembling landing gear for airplanes and you've got to show it off at an air show in France, I assume. Aren't all the air shows in France?
Yeah, they are.
Right. And so like there's a deadline, and the definition of done is, holy crap, the plane's got to land safely. The gear's got to work. It can't break. Right. It's pretty clear there. Right. But for the majority of folks who don't do that, the majority of folks who work on software products, the definition of done for those folks, in my opinion, right, is not the delivery of a specific set of features, but it's the positive impact that they have on the behaviors of their customers. And the thing, and again, kind of coming back to the overall topic, and again, caveating that this is based on my experience with the clients that I've worked with and I've tried to implement this, is that they struggle to change the definition of done away from we built the thing and we shipped it at the end of the cycle, whatever the cycle is, to, hey, we delivered value to customers, and we know this because they changed their behavior, right, in a positive way. Outputs to outcomes being sort of the key conversation here. And I think that that's a real challenge for people who are taking the SAFe training, taking the SAFe classes, and or bringing this process into an organization for the sake of predictability, right? Because again, right, yes, we want predictability, but humans are unpredictable. Right?
Oh, sure.
They do crazy stuff all the time, and software is complex and unpredictable. And what we believed was true before, when it comes to implementing or designing this thing or whatever, is not. We're going to be wrong, right? We're not going to be 100% wrong in most cases, but rarely are we going to be 100% right out of the gate. And I think it's those are the elements that the teams that I work with find missing in this. And I think that if we can help them find that, right, then everybody wins.
Let me jump on a few things here, right? So it's hard to.
I'd like to come back really to the UX question, because we have some questions on UX. It's okay. Finish this quick debate, but really we have questions about a lot of UX.
Yeah, we'll do UX in a sec.
And that's really the one.
I know we're supposed to do UX all the time. I'll go knock off a question, but here's the issue that I have with Scrum, Jeff, and it's part of what I wrote about in my Startup Safe article, is I think Scrum is great, but Scrum is agile in the small. And I think organizations have a responsibility to also apply agile to big decisions, like where am I, Scrum is great if I've got a product and I want to advance that product with UX or not, right? And we'll rope UX in here. What Scrum doesn't help me do as a company is determine which product initiative I want to fund. That's a portfolio decision.
Agreed.
And so that's why I've gravitated personally towards SAFE, is because I needed to help my clients not just improve the products themselves, but the process by which they're selecting products and funding experiments and engaging in investments. Now, the other thing is that this notion of outputs to outcomes is super powerful. And I have a very not very long, I have a very thoughtful blog about this, about even in my own new company, First Root, talking about First Root's outputs versus outcomes, right? The outcome, the behavior change that First Root is creating is greater financial literacy and greater civic engagement. It's a way to measure that outcome would be, do students who go through our program become more actively engaged in their civil society? Do they vote, for example? You're in Barcelona, Jeff. So if Barcelona does participatory budgeting, if we move it into schools, do students who go through the program with the outcome that we seek, which is greater civic engagement? The challenge that I have with outcome thinking is that it's considerably harder to integrate into a program than output thinking, because to actually have an outcome, you have to determine a baseline, and you have to determine how you're going to measure that baseline, and you're going to have to decide the degree to which you can take credit for the change in behavior if it's positive. So what I write about in my own article is I don't want our community, UX, Agile or otherwise, to completely throw out outputs, because there are times where outputs are an appropriate measurement because of the challenges created with measuring outcomes. But yeah, for sure, we do want to have outcomes as our focus, but I don't want to throw out the notion of certain forms of output measurement. And with that, I think we should figure out one of the UX questions.
Let's let Daniel figure that out.
Yeah. So let me pick a good question that's easy from Lou Harvey. Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, you can pick one up. And really, I think one of the UX is really, they're all around. Why is UX siloed on this infographic? Why is it not referenced? Where are we actually in this image? How can we actually integrate ourselves and not just be minimized? Those are some questions that rise up, and we also often could you nice to learn about. Well, how do you do that?
Yeah, I love the question. And Danny, if you were to share your screen again and show the SAFE graphic, I want to point out something about. Now, I'm not a graphic artist and I'm not an information architect, right? So the people on this call could probably all do it better. But if you look at the SAFE configuration, I don't know if you can show that again, Danny.
It's coming. 1 second.
Okay. This is specifically to the answer to the question to Lou, but to everyone. The construction of the SAFE infographic on the right is that the right-hand side is called the spanning palette. And the spanning palette is the portion of the graphic that is reserved by the framework team for those elements of the framework that we think are so important that they cut every level. So meaning we think having a vision is so important at every level, either the enterprise vision, the portfolio vision, the product vision, it's on what we call the spanning palette. So from the frameworks team perspective, the notion of lean UX and lean UX practices is so essential to the proper functioning of SAFE that we pulled it out of the center and put it into the spanning palette. So for Lou, that's why it's in the spanning palette, because the framework team considered it so vital to success, along with a roadmap, along with the notion of what a milestone is and the kinds of milestones that SAFe has. That's why it's on the spanning palette. It's considered that important.
Thank you for that. Great response to the question. And we have a question from Danny Boss.
No,
yeah, I'm going to turn it over. One more question.
On the element. So you see I think you know Lean UX. So tell us a little bit how you see it here and what you learned about it. It came here somewhere in this framework, because it's an often asked question. So you see Lean UX overall. How would you respond to the answer from Luke?
Well, what's the question? I'm sorry, what's the question?
No, just to say, often there is many debates are, so why is Lean UX here? What do you think, Jeff, of being it here, that it arrived here in this framework? There's an often posed question.
Look, I mean, look, if we're critiquing the visualization, which I don't know that that's terribly fair, but if we're critiquing the visualization, I would love to see the integration of the practices visualized into the flow diagram. But I don't know that we're here to debate the quality of these graphics, unless we believe that it's these posters that have a significant influence over how this work is ultimately implemented. If that's the case, and I don't know that it is, right? If that's the case, then we can critique the graphic design here, right? And we can say, look, why aren't the processes kind of, integrated into the overall large diagram here? But again, I don't know how much influence the poster has on what people actually do every day at work.
Yeah, I think I agree with Jeff. I mean, and to be honest, right? I mean, the poster gets debated quite a lot, and it is not perfect. But if one of the things that I would actually talk about is if the Lean UX community or the UX community that's on this call can get over perhaps different word choices in SAFe, there's a lot of incredible value in SAFe. And I'll give you one of my favorite things. And Jeff, you can correct me, but I think I know Scrum pretty well. I've never seen in the Scrum guide or in the Scrum literature from other Scrum variants a very clear explanation of what SAFe calls the solution context. Meaning, we're all talking about solutions, and to your point, we want this change in behavior, but there's this. Every system runs in its own contextual environment, right? And the degree to which SAFe emphasizes the solution context, I think, is actually a strength of SAFe relative to user experience, because it's where you get the input and the lens into talking about stakeholders. And I used to have these big debates even with Dean directly as a member of the framework team. And I said, I remember one time I said to Dean, Dean, you don't understand. As a product manager, I'm trying to change the solution context into my favor. And Dean looks at me and he said, Luke, if you're trying to land a plane on a ship because you're building, military equipment, you can't change the solution context that ship is going to be bobbing in the water. Mm-hmm. So so I think that was a really insightful thing. And then Dean, of course, conceded. He's like, yes, of course, product people want to change that solution context. But the reality is that product people fail when they don't acknowledge the solution context that they're working in. And I'm only using this as a slight, kind of olive branch to the UX community who's anti-SAFe to say, what are you really against, right? Have you actually read that article? And then are you against the choice of words? Okay, there may be some, to Jeff's point, are you against the visualization of the framework? Yeah, I mean, it's not always the best thing in my mind either. So the question becomes, where are the issues? Are they issues of espoused theory or actual practice? Are there issues, as Jeff correctly points out, where people establish the wrong objective, right? The objective isn't to get everyone certified. The objective is to create better products and services. And I think that's important. And then we can pick up another topic, Danny, another question. I'm happy to.
And to be clear, this is the work that we did when integrating Lean UX into Scrum, or at least working with Scrum.org to do that, right? Is adding those questions, adding those challenges, like, hey, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What are the constraints that we have to operate within, right? And then like, who are we building it for, right? What are the constraints that they're operating in? How do we know that they're actually experiencing these challenges, right? UX work, right? And it's when we've done that, it's actually, it's added that into that process. So if that exists in Scrum and it happens and it takes place and it includes designers and UX people in that process, that in theory should generate a better process and a better outcome for that safe powered project.
I have a very quick question, because I love the discussion. This is why this is what we were hoping for, and we're really sad that we're not in a physical space. What I wanted to ask, because I know that Jeff needs to drop. Jeff, can you stay somewhat longer? And maybe Luke needs to drop as well originally, because it was planned for an hour. But if you can stay around, then we could, because we have a workshop on the same topic following right after. We can tell the people, like, hey, for the first 30 minutes or whatever time of the workshop, rather come here, because this is good stuff that we're having here.
I have a hard stop.
No worries. No problem. No problem at all.
But I would be honored to hang out with Jeff again and the team again if that was appropriate. Let me add a few other things, right? I think that part of the value of UX, and sometimes the way I explain UX to my own, team and investors and other people, is I refer to UX as what I call kitchen work. And let me explain kitchen work. My wife and I had our babies at home with the midwife. And I remember one time after one of the babies was born, the midwife said, well, it's time to, make sure we don't have kitchen work. We got to get all the kitchen work done. I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, and it was a longer story, but summarizing, she said, people don't notice a clean kitchen. They notice a dirty kitchen. So if you walk into someone's house, you don't note it. You're not going to remark that, oh, this is a clean kitchen. And I call it kitchen work, because kitchen work is the stuff that just makes the environment pleasant. And I think a lot of the UX work is hard to advocate for, because when UX is working well, it's almost less noticeable in the world than when UX is working poorly, right? When a system is well designed, when it meets the needs of the stakeholders, when it's enjoyable, it's pleasant, it allows me to accomplish my objectives, it changes the behavior, as Jeff pointed out, in the way that the designers intended, it tends to be less valued because it's like kitchen work. No one values the clean kitchen per se, but we complain about the dirty one. And I think that is not a safe issue, and that is more of an agile issue, because agilists tend to value, in a sense, the dirty kitchen, because they want to have small things that they can fit within the sprint and clean up. and I often remark on that.
Hosts.
I just want, because so we go for a hard stop, we will have a follow-up workshop where we go deeper. And I would just want to correct, I wouldn't say UX are against safe or else. I think what we discover is what's our role within it. And that was also the opening question, also why we wanted to start a debate, and where we struggle at the moment. Should we contribute within? Should we contribute without? If you look at the questions here, they're often about what kind of role, where can we really put our power and energy within it, and where do we hit walls which were created or we perceive that there are walls within the whole framework. And just to correct you. So that's also why we wanted to start this debate. It's to learn how can we contribute in the whole part.
Yeah. And so I'm going to reframe the question, and I'm going to pose it to Luke because I'm curious what he has to say, right? Because look, I think the role of UX in SAFE is to be UX, to be UXers, right? To do the work that you know how to do, all the things that fall under the umbrella of UX design and interaction design, copywriting and experimentation and research and whatever else, right? Information architecture, et cetera, right? That's the role. I think the challenge and the reason why we're even having this conversation is that people struggle to make that happen, right? And that's certainly been my experience, and certainly the inbound emails that I get on a regular basis speak to that. Like, I would love to do my job, and this process does not seem to allow me to do that. And so what are ways, I think, that to fit, and remembering too, and forgive me for saying this at a UX conference, but remembering too that UX designers always struggle to influence an organization, almost exclusively, almost 100% of the time, struggle to be in a position where they have true influence over how an organization works or organizational culture, right? And so given those two things, I want to do really great UX work, and often I don't find myself in a position that can influence how the organization works. And now I'm in this context that I'm struggling to fit into. What are ways to be successful? And I again, as I wrote in my article 2 weeks ago, I don't know, right? I think it's a real challenge.
Yeah, and I've given these conversations and talks. And I'll close with this because I understand, Jeff. But you know what? I've heard that bitching and whining from QA people my whole effing career. Oh, Luke, you don't understand. I'm a QA person and I want to deliver high quality and I struggle to get the product out the door. Oh my God, what do I do? How do I influence the organization to want quality? You don't understand my struggle. Like, come on.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
Right. So here's what I tell people. No one's job except the product manager is to be the mini CEO and be the responsible party. So one brutal response is, if you want to be in charge, go be a product manager or a general manager. And then you get to go put in UX and QA or whatever else you want because you're the king or the queen. Now, in my world, the reality is this, and I was being overly dramatic to make the point, but you laughed, thank God, right? But the point is I am a CEO of a company, and guess what? I do the best I can by integrating my UX team, but they're an input, not the sole decision maker. The decision maker is made by a collaborative group of people. So if you want the key to the code to crack SAFE, I'll give you 3 keys to the code to crack SAFE. 1, make sure your individual definition of agile team includes a UX person, and then downplay the title. More than 15 years ago in my companies and in the organizations I ran, I stopped having a separate QA title and a separate QA function. And then I do have a separate UX function and I do have a separate title, even though they're part of the team. But what I do is I don't remove them from the team. I remove them from the time horizon. And that's the second thing I do. If you read my Startup Safe article, you'll realize that my UX team is designing the vision and testing the vision while giving the Agile team appropriate things to do for an iteration or a sprint. So I think that the UX team is a time dislocated function, but not a team dislocated function. And the third thing I do, and I would advocate, is actually read this the SAFE articles. And the article that you want to read the most is to look at the continuous exploration article, which talks about how we're going to go interact with customers continually. And where that article could arguably be improved, because I was the principal author of it, so I know where it could be improved, is really emphasizing some of these time dislocations that enable the UX team to do their work. That their work is the work that's going to be consumed. So they need to do work now that other people are doing, consuming later. It's kind of like if you're making a turkey dinner for Thanksgiving, you have to start defrosting the turkey on Saturday or Sunday, right? To make sure it's fully prepared for eating on Thursday. And I think that the UX team needs to be recognizing its time displacement, if you will.
I too don't care for the victim mentality either, right? And I think that's appropriate criticism, Luke. So thank you for sharing that dramatization. But again, but you look at the questions here, right, in the chat. And I think people are like, look, how do I do my job, right? And I think that's the challenge that they're facing. And I recognize we're out of time, but it's a good discussion.
All right, hey everyone, thank you. I've got a bolt. I know Jeff's got a bolt. Jeff, much love and much respect. And dude, love your stuff. Yeah, look at all the claps and hearts. Put me in there. And if we decide to do this again, count me in.
Excellent. Yeah, this was a ton of fun. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, and also thanks, Jeff. And for us, as you know, we start now with a workshop where we exactly go in, how can we work better with it? And it's a starting debate. And we're not so desolate. We're going to do that, and we're going to push our ideas and stuff forward together. No worries. Thanks a lot.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Jesse, I left you here, and
I just want to say hi to Luke, if I can, and thank you both for everything. Thank you. It was a great debate. I'm not on video. Hold on. I'm back. Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.